Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Elisa Francesconi, and I'm part of the Thanks for Nothing team as programming and production coordinator. And today I have the honor and the pleasure to introduce you three amazing guests that we have the honor to host this afternoon. Martin Guinard, you are a curator at Luma Foundation. You have previously worked with Bruno Latour on environmental transition and climate change, and have worked with artist Chang Yung-ta, who explores one's relationship to its own space, which is something you will talk about later on the talk. Charwei Tsai, you are a Taiwanese-born artist living in Paris, and represented by Mont Charpentier of Paris and the TKG Plus Gallery Taipei. Your interdisciplinary practice is spurred with spirituality and highly personal yet universal concerns. Having exhibited at the Guangzhou Biennale, the Mori Art Museum, the Centre Pompidou, and the list goes on. And Quỳnh Lam, you are a multidisciplinary artist highlighting the tension between personal and collective memory. You have exhibited worldwide at the Pulse Gallery in Bangkok, the factory in Ho Chi Minh City, but also in Italy, Germany, Belgium, the United States, and the list goes on also. And the topic of our conversation will be hearing the critical zone, collective narratives, reference to Bruno Latour's concept of zone critique, critical zone. All of you have worked on introducing new narratives and bringing new topics to the table, often linked to the critical state of human life on Earth. So the floor is yours, and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Elisa, and I think we are going to start with you, Martin, if you may. Maybe you can also share with the audience a more precise definition of the critical zone and of the topics that also fluid and I would say feeds your research and curatorial projects.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot for hosting us here. It's wonderful to be able to speak about these events. So really, thank you, Marine. Thank you to all of you. Maybe we can start with we could put the YouTube video in the background without sound, otherwise it's going to be super annoying. And I'll start by describing a bit what does the critical zone means actually. So critical zone, we did an exhibition in Karlsruhe with Bruno Latour about it, and then like some artists in Taiwan were commissioned works specifically in regard to that. And so here you see a bunch of folks. These are, well, here you see the artist as well. Maybe we can skip that part. Although it's very important to see him. That's Chang Yung-ta. We'll be speaking about him a lot. But you see some folks with different instruments here in a place that is in Taiga. Sorry for my pronunciation. Actually, I think it's fine. Taroko, which is one of the biggest natural reserves in Taiwan. And why do people would go there? Why would so many scientists from different disciplines would go there? Well, it's because it's one of the places with the quickest erosion rate in the world. It's about 100 times quicker than anywhere else. And that actually has a huge, after I'll stop talking about science geeky stuff, but that's one of the most important places in the cycle of carbon at a world level. Therefore, what happens, I think we can put pause because we'll talk about that as well after. What happens is that, tu peux mettre la vidéo sur pause, juste tu cliques là. Voilà. What happens is that different scientists realized that they were really good at understanding various parameters in terms of how the water was flowing, how its chemical composition, the composition of the atmosphere, etc., etc. But there was a lack of discussion between them to understand the actual dynamic that foster life on Earth. So they created those labs that are, per definition, interdisciplinary in the sense that they bring together hydrologists, ecologists, soil scientists, who are all going to work on hotspots where something quite extraordinary from an Earth system science point of view happens. So these, we call them the CZOs, for critical zone observatories. And as we're starting to work on that for a big exhibition in Karlsruhe at the Zentrum für Kunstmedia, we saw that there was actually like part of the network, because these are networks of labs. One of the big ones was in Taipei. So we thought, okay, great, let's work with artists and then board them with that. But before I go into that detail, I'll just talk about, these are the observatories that you could see. But to talk a bit about what is the concept of a critical zone, the concept is pretty much, instead of just thinking of ecology, that is kind of a sort of flat definition of human life interaction somehow, the critical zonists, they're going to look at the they're going to study the 3 kilometers above our head, the 3 kilometers under our feet, and so how the air, the soil, the subsoil, the water, all interact together in order to create the condition of our life on Earth. So as you can imagine, that's pretty important, because if we get a better understanding of those dynamics, then we might get better chances of getting by. Well, preserving, I think it's too late, but to, let's stay there. And so really, like that's one of the, it was super exciting to go with an artist like Yongda, and maybe now we can move on with the video a little bit. And I can show you one of the pieces he did going to, so you see him doing programming, you can see him like, okay, setting up the space here. And you're gonna see those big tubes behind. Those big tubes, actually, they're kind of reproducing the dynamics that you would find in the landscape. He didn't make that all on his own, like he worked with scientists who were helping him to do the modelization of what the river would be. And oh, he stops on its own. Great.
It's perfect, yeah.
But no, but don't worry. Pretty much the point is that with those, you can see, it's going to be hard to explain without the images, but
it's the critical zone of the internet.
Yeah, it's critical point. It's the critical point. No, anyway, you have little pieces of stone that are flat at the beginning. They're at the center of those tubes here. You can see one actually on the forefront here. Okay, like you see a little piece of stone here. There's water that is going to replicate the kind of current that you would have in the river that was showing before in Taroko. And you have little bits of black balls that are hitting it, actually just like the rock would hit the bottom of the water. And because each of these tubes replicates exactly the kind of current that you would have, by the end of the exhibition, the flat stab have become carved by the movement. And so that becomes like a very, very beautiful, it's marble, so there's a very, very beautiful statement about sculpture where it's an artist working on, let's say, some, with the most traditional medium that there is for sculpture, marble, but his hand is not going to touch the marble at any point. It's all going to be sculpted by the replication of the water of the river. And that's maybe a first way of introducing to the title, hearing the critical zone, because it actually makes a kind of little noise that is quite beautiful. And it's got this notion, let's say, of like what could it be to carve, to listen to the geochemical process that are at the heart of some of the process that we rely upon. And when I say we, I mean the earthbound, the livings, in connection with all the geological forces. So this was just to show you a little bit. I think we might get back to the images a bit later, but I'm going to go now, although it was called Hearing the Critical Zone, we're going to go slightly off topic with the new exhibition that is occurring right now. It's one of the last days actually in TFAM, in Taipei Fine Art Museum. Et donc là, si tu peux mettre peut-être la deuxième vidéo avec le son. So
this is another option for tomorrow. Going to Taipei to see the last day of
voilà,
Martin
merci
Guinard.
Beaucoup.
We're offering so many options for the planet. It's amazing.
Donc peut-être un tout petit peu moins fort. Donc here it's another exhibition that is occurring right now. Yongda is working a lot. He's got a fascination for radiations because he was actually in Fukushima when the catastrophe occurred. And so as there are two things that were really striking to him. The first one is that he started to pay attention to radioactivity because radioactivity is actually not, it's everywhere. Right now you're being bombarded by some solar radiation that or cosmic radiation that come from really far away. So the radioactivity comes from under our feet. There is a bit of radioactivity in our phones, but there's also radioactivity that comes from really like the deepest parts, the farthest part of the universe. Of course, it's not as intense as the one that you would have in a nuclear power plant. And actually there's, you know, we're protected from them, luckily. Otherwise they wouldn't be, I mean, we wouldn't be there to talk about it. But he really started to think of various kind of dispositifs that would be able to get us to feel what those cosmic rays, how they enter into our life at every milliseconds, but for really a very brief time. And so there, maybe we can go to the second video, and I'll focus on like one piece in particular, which is like you'll see a major circular shape. It's called Without Composing 2, and I'll explain the title is quite important, where you enter into this kind of like circular sculpture. You see all those red dots, and each of these dots is connected to a processor. The processor is processing what? It's actually capturing through Geiger counters radiation that are coming both from everywhere, but a lot from, you know, like the deep depth of the universe, and is converting it into this kind of noise that you hear that is almost like an insect noise. And so here there's something really interesting that happens for me, because he's trying to within like with this kind of dispositive, like it's really like part of all his work of showing the invisible, hearing the inaudible, or even in this case like hearing the invisible somehow. There's something synesthetic about that, about kind of like creating this sort of like composition, but where what is his place as an artist? Well, he's not creating the sound. It's the cosmic rays that decide when they want, in a way, to activate the sensors. That's the cosmic rays that activate them. What he does is like he creates a setup, a situation, and that is going to redistribute the process of the sound that we hear about. So, of course, one can think of plenty of references. John Cage, you know, when he's starting with like 4 minute 33 and staging this form of silence. But John Cage, there's something that is very important in his practice, is that he did not want to transform the sound. Whereas Zhang Yongda, of course, the sound gets transformed by definition because it's processed. But the point in common, I think, for is taking the time to listen to forces that you don't control, that are created and that can become a form of musicality, which I think is very interesting. You see, he's got a bit of wiring here. Well, you see, I'm not sure what you see actually, because I should have warned that this is like in pitch dark, but you get somehow an idea.
We hear.
Anyway, you have until tomorrow to see it in Taipei, so that's the good news. Et donc, yeah, no, I think that there's, I mean, I can keep on talking, or we can go on to, but maybe one of the, But we should talk with the artist. Yeah. So maybe to say, like, one of the interesting thing in relationship to the title of the talk right now, to hearing the critical zone, in a way there is something where it's extremely important that artists are going to find diverse mediums, diverse ways of making us pay attention to those dynamics that are really shaping what makes life possible on Earth, but also like all those phenomena that are coming to it that are also not, you know, like it's really important to think about the Earth in terms of what is down there, but also think of the relationship that it can have with those forces that come from so far away. Like, I think that there is a really poetic gesture, and, you know, like in a way, like there's a lot of ecologies about the forests in terms of aesthetic, whereas it's also very interesting to think of this kind of cosmic relationship, the fact that we're we're dust from, like originally, life, you know, like all forms of life on Earth were created through dust that was coming from the stars. The Earth comes from those kind of dust, and I think that there is this very beautiful duality of like what brings us down there and what comes from so far away, and how it kind of connects within a fleeting moment through those cosmic rays, which again are going through us at the moment when we speak. So voilà, that's the connection to
Perfect.
the talk. Merci beaucoup.
Large introduction, but that was perfect. Do you wanna follow up with the conversation with Charwei? Yeah. So here you are. And so you know each other pretty well, very well, and you know your work very well. So Martin, you can keep going with the work.
I think it's so good if Charwei tells us which work we're going to talk about in specifically. It's it does.
I'm sure it does. No, you're right. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me here, and thanks to everyone.
No, you
Just closer.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks thanks for everyone for having me here, and it's so nice to see friends from different parts of my time in Paris here, from my time at École des Beaux-Arts and then also like more recently. But so I think of my work as in different, like it's kind of like different kinds of circles, and then even though like what Martin, like his practice or what he showed, it seems very different in terms of like I guess visually and also the approach, but I think there's a lot of connections in terms of how I'm thinking about these circles that I create as different planets as well. So so the firstly is I call it outer circles or expanding circles, which are made with people from very different, very diverse communities. For example, I work with the earthquake victims from Nepal and with women asylum seekers in London, and then also with indigenous communities in Taiwan. And so I see, because a lot of time, I think the commonality with these communities is that they contribute the least to the devastation of what's happening in this world with the planet, but at the same time, they're the most impacted by our actions and decisions. So a part of my work is kind of bring awareness to what's happening to these communities who I come across. And then the second part of my work is I publish a publication called Lovely Days since 2005 while I was working in New York at Printed Matter, this independent art bookstore. And so this is a platform where I present my inner circles, which is our artists and colleagues who I meet across, like exhibitions. So I present artists in their own words, their writings. And so this is kind of like almost like a curatorial journal that I publish. And then the third kind of circle that I think of it is like inner circle, where it's more about my inner search, like looking inwardly to kind of finding almost like an inner justice or inner balance between my body, my speech, and my mind, and the synchronicity. So all of like my more personal works come out of this. And then these two kind of different spheres, so working, sometimes they combine and they merge and they're together, and then sometimes they kind of go separate ways, but it's always interconnected. And so I'll go over some examples of what I'm talking about with the slides. So this was a performance that I did last year at Pompidou during the Forum Climat, where I drew a circle on ice, because in my practice I work a lot with ephemeral objects. And also connecting to what Martin was saying, I guess I was became more informed about art while I was in New York. So very much influenced by the artists in the 60s, especially like John Cage, Fluxus, and all of that, where the process of making the work is almost as important, or it is as important as the object itself. So in this performance, I'm just drawing a circle on ice and then letting it melt away. And the reason why the circle as a visual form is important is because it's both a form and a void. So it's this interdependence between this material, like what we see, and then what we don't see, that creates the form.
Just because we don't have the luck of seeing you live working on it, like how was it working with like the block of ice? Like, because you talk about the circularity and we see the ice and we understand that there's a projection behind, but just can you describe this a little bit, like what were we seeing on the screen, for example, during the performance?
It was a very interesting experience, because before this performance, what I usually do is I'm invited to durational performance where I'm writing on mantra. Writing mantras on ephemeral materials, and audience kind of come and go. But in this one, it's like I enter the stage and I make the gesture of drawing the circle on ice, and then I was working with a sound musician from Mongolia, and the sound, which is really, really powerful. I don't know how to describe, but it comes up. And then in the projection, you see how the circle slowly dissipates. Yeah.
No, but it's also, I know, you're right, it doesn't work. I see, yes, it does. I don't know. No, it's interesting. I'm just linking because some of you were in the presentation and the conversation this morning with Nicolas Bourriot, who is the curator of the next Guangzhou Biennale. And part of the program that he revealed this morning, it was also a lot about space and sound. So I think it is interesting just to connect that about the work. And thanks to you, we had the Ma question, which completely highlight all of us, which is the perfect definition of distance in between objects and sound and us. So I just wanted to point that out.
Which tone is it?
Ma.
Okay.
Japanese concept.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and I just have like 4 or 5 more slides. I'll go through them very quickly. So the next work, these 2 slides, it shows my work with the different communities using craft as the media. So this one I'm working with indigenous community in Taiwan, who I've known the family for maybe like almost 2 decades, because in the 80s when Taiwanese government, they have an initiative to give the land back to the ancestral land back to the indigenous community, and then a lot of them actually, because of their need for like just quick money, a lot of them decided to rent it to cash crop farms, which completely destroys the land and its neighboring land, just to receive the rent quickly, because they were not in a good financial situation.
Why would the crops destroy the land, Charwei?
Because they're cash crop companies, so they try.
What is a cash crop?
So.
D'accord. Okay. Oui, okay. Intensive agriculture.
Yeah.
Okay,
so it's like they try to plant whatever crop they're doing as fast as possible with like really toxic, ingredients and all that. And then so this family, instead of going in that route, they connected 7 different families, and they started permaculture on this big piece of land, and then doing sustainable farming and all of that. And then slowly, as their economy got better by doing a farm-to-table business, they started getting into trying to learn the craft again of weaving, because when the Japanese colonized Taiwan, they partially banned the indigenous people from their weaving tradition. And so here I'm kind of working with the family, with the grandmother and the granddaughter, and kind of finding ways to bring back, you know, the natural dye, and then like hand spun hemp yarn and all of that to weave this work. And then the next slide, please. And then okay, these two slides. So here is the work that I show at Gwangju Biennale, where I was working with craftswomen from Abu Dhabi, and to make this kind of household object, also made from very local material. And this group of women, they became a marginalized community because of all the buildings and all the construction that's happening in Abu Dhabi. So they were kind of pushed out of, you know, their own land. And so this project, I was working with a foundation to kind of support their work, like where they can bring this, you know, it's palm leaves home, and then they can weave at home in their own time while their children are around, and then also making a living so that they have actually more say and more power in their households. So this work, it's called a temple, a shrine, a mosque, a church. So these kind of everyday objects, they become transformed into this more like another, I guess, another kind of space.
Yeah, no, there's definitely something about the fact that you work with, let's say, materials that would remind of a craft, a very strong craft, so like some of almost like a decorative form, and you always manage to find this small touch that would literally like heighten it up. And here it's literally being heightened up. The fact that it's floating, you know, like makes that it's not a rug anymore. It's really like it becomes a piece. It becomes of its own. I just have two questions about this work. First of all, like this one is for the Guangzhou Biennale. I know that you have worked a lot with the indigenous communities in Taiwan, because there's like many tribes. You've done actually lots of work in places where the state had major controversies and came to document some of that. But I'm wondering, how did you came to work with people that were in Abu Dhabi, for example? It's in, you know, like knowing that the locality is very different, of course. I mean, you're showing it in Guangzhou, which is totally fine. I'm just wondering, like, how did it come across, pretty much?
Actually, I was invited to make a public art project for Art Dubai by Natasha from Cité des Arts, okay. the curator.
Natasha Petrezine.
Yes, and then so she had connected me with the foundation in Abu Dhabi. So that was.
The second question I have, and this one is a bit trickier, but it's because, you know, like there's a lot of things that are about the collaboration with those craftsmen and women, and so I'm just wondering, like, it's maybe a suggestion, like, why not putting their names as, you know, in the co-authorship of the thing, knowing that, like, you know, like it's come together, and there's Charwei Tsai, and in somehow, like, there's of course an inherent contradiction in that, and so, like, how do you
actually, it's very interesting questions, because I spoke with the foundation. A lot of women, they don't want their names on this. Like, they don't want the acknowledgement, because it's something that they don't feel comfortable to be publicized. So it's very different, depends on the culture. And then for the other, like the Taiwanese indigenous community, because she's a young weaver who is trying to promote what she's making, so then definitely she is acknowledged, you know. So it really depends on the culture. And then also it's very different approach. Like, for example, when I'm Okay, on the right.
And so you asked systematically before you did one of this piece, okay, how do you had that question coming up, okay, like who's going to sign the piece? Like that came up in the...
No, actually, for me, like I would love to acknowledge them. Like there's no reason why I wouldn't. I want to claim this as my own work because it wouldn't make any sense. Like it would be great to have a whole list of names, but like it's kind of their choice.
Oh, it's interesting.
Of different ways of contributing to the project and different kind of worldviews about this acknowledgement of authorship that is different from the Western point of view. So for example, this group I'm working with in South Bank, I was also connected through the South Bank with a group of women asylum seekers called Women for Refugee Women. And then here I'm recording songs from them. And then in this series, I'm also working with victims from Nepal. And again, it's like a very different approach. So for example, this was through South Bank in London. So we made sure, like everyone who was filmed signed a release and, that kind of acknowledgement again. But in Nepal, when I'm going into an earthquake camp and I'm asking them to sign papers, like they would just be so concerned, like what I'm doing to them, so it's very, very different approach. And I guess because of my background, like I've lived 10 years in Asia and I've lived half of my life in the West. So I just, have to kind of navigate through these different ways. Okay. I think there's a last slide quickly and then we'll wrap up. Okay, I won't go into the...
I was referring about that one earlier, so that's great if you want to talk about this.
Okay, this was what Martin was referring to, where I work with another indigenous group, very different from the ones in the mountains, where the community in mountains, their main, historically their main source of food, I guess, is from hunting. And so it's a very different way of living. Then here is the community from the sea. So they're through fishing, their main income, I guess, is through fishing. So I was initially interested in this shamanistic dance that these women would perform, where they wave their hair up and down. And it's a ceremonial dance where they're bringing their men safely back from the ocean. And then while I was spending more time on this island, I realized that the Taiwanese government actually put the nuclear power waste on this island since the 80s. And I was because
to say, like, they told them that this was just water tanks, not that there was the nuclear waste.
No, actually, it's even worse. They told them that they were canneries, to help their economy. To fish cannery, they're building factories to help their economy. And at that time, not just the indigenous people, in Taiwan, nobody knows what nuclear waste is and the impact of nuclear waste. And then so then this video became a short story about the situation on the island. And then this shows my the publication I was talking.
Yeah.
Okay,
you were mentioning lovely.
Okay, sorry.
Days. Yeah. Well, actually, I think it is a great transition to your work, Quỳnh, because performances is also a very important part of your work. We could, for those who were there, who are here, I don't know where I am anymore since we're traveling from Seoul to Taipei and to many biennales since this morning. So for those who were here in Paris at La Monnaie de Paris yesterday, so you did a performance right there. You've seen, I'm sure, the archive of the performance, which are the flowers that you can see on the ground, and also the way you use the flowers themselves to draw and write. So do you want to talk about your work as a Vietnamese artist, also how the communist situation influenced maybe a lot of your practice, and how, Martin, so it's going to be I'm actually sending too much concept in once, but also Martin mentioned it, how your work is also about I would say, the space that you describe in between the earth, the soil, but also above it and underneath it, because you also work on this space in between those three layers, I could say.
Well, of course, I will talk about this, but I think that there is a lot of things to talk about. And yeah, and also speaking of Taipei, I just want to mention quickly, I was in my previous residency at Taipei Performing Arts Center, which is in August. So now we have all this combination from Taipei. I will think about Taipei today. Anyway, speaking of performance, why performance? I guess my answer is as an artist from a communist country, for me, I chose to do a performance because it's also something like to deal with censorship, but also like cultural police, you know, where by the time if they get to the venues, maybe everything will disappear. So. Yeah,
very beautiful way of talking about ephemerality. That was
that's ephemeral, because most of my work is all about ephemerals, and so there's no evidence or something, so it's just a performance. Yeah, because if you write a novel, you write something, or even like create a painting, so it can be something that people can take it on an object, a physical object, and they can have a proof or evidence. But now if I do performance, then nobody can do something with that. So yes, I have my also another performance I did in the U.S. During the time I was there, and this is I guess it is a series. I also do the burying the flowers, so maybe we can look at this a little.
Yeah, it's really burying the flowers.
Yeah,
which is exactly what you have described, actually.
Yeah, it's also like burying a secret, and
where was the performance? Where was it?
So this one, actually, you know, as a person who growing up the entire life in Vietnam, I only did my MFA program in the US. So at that time, when I can have access to the library system and can do some other research, like, because I deal with archive a lot, and I found some. It's for me it's also like a horrible historical event which is never revealed in my home country, and it's kind of like also a traumatic experience, and I was just so shocked. I didn't know how to deal with that, and I was keep thinking, and then I end up with like the idea that to do the performance is like happening. And here, if you can see, I have the flower covering in the plastic bag. This was also associated with like the some of the article journal that I found from the I feel like ambiguous history in Vietnam. So I just had come up with the concept to think about the flower like a plant life with human life. And maybe we can change to the slide. I have here I would not say more in detail about who did this. Maybe I mean that people in Vietnam, they may know about this, but they hesitate to talk about this. And it's something also very sensitive topic. This is the article that I found about the Hue massacre. So during the Vietnam Wars in 1968, we have the they call it Tết offensive. So Tết offensive is like Tết means like Lunar New Year in Vietnam. So like it's like usually we have the tradition like the day like Lunar Eve. So the day before the Lunar New Year, we will go to the flower market and we buy some flower. That's something like for also like to dedicate to the ancestor. And for me, flower also like a metaphor, you know, like when we are really happy, we can give flower to someone for a birthday, wedding, and even like go to the funeral, you use flower for different meaning. And yeah, so here I I found in the article something that's human body in the plastic bag, and so I went back to my studio. And I just like put like some of the flower in the zip bags. We have the plastic bag, and like a few days after 1 week, a few months, so it's just like a very stinky, rotten thing in the bag. It's like the color changing, and even like it's different color, vivid color, and it's only come like one like. It makes me link to like the idea of death and the like human body, and maybe we can change to next slide, please. And this is the flower market behind my house in Vietnam. So it's called like Ho Thị Kỷ flower market. This is something usually happen at the end of the Lunar New Year. So one day when I saw this have like the story behind that, because usually all of the sellers, they farm different provinces. So they only bring flower to the city and try to sell it as soon as possible. Because when the new year comes, they have to go back to their family and like reunions family. So what happened if they didn't sell all of the flower? They just decided and throw it away on the trees. And it's something that they want to destroy it because they don't want people reuse or took the flower back home if they don't buy it. So this for me, I feel like this look like an aftermath. I feel like this is like also a mass grave because all of the flower, and it remind me to the thing that I just found out before. So this for me also very interesting in the way of something very aromatic, because even like if you walk through the thing, it's still like something you can smell it, but the day before and the day after it might changing and transforming. Yeah, so maybe next slide. And again, this is another article, and not like from the New York Times, but I think that's a Life magazine, and also talk about the Huế massacre. Test offensive with all of the remains of the dead body, and from the story I heard that the people were picked up from their house, and it's like a group of intellectual, so expats who were like professor teaching in Vietnam in Huế, and they were all like being like buried when they're still alive. Yeah.
Something really quite interesting in the sense that, I mean, you're working with one convention, the one of putting flowers to honor the memory of people, you know, like that typically, and that's, I guess that, I mean, I know that in Asia it's fine, Taiwan is the same, I don't know how it is in Vietnam, but, you know, like honoring the flowers, and so that, well, and so you're working with that, you give that kind of ephemeral moment, but to remember a form of intensity of body, but of an event, and at the same time, you create that connection with this mortuary bag, the fact that they're wrapped up in plastic and thrown up here, and that's, I mean, it's a very violent image that you're connecting it to, but you give a form of reading that is quite interesting, because there's really like two complete different ways of perceiving these flowers when you do it. Like they do perform the conventional act of memory of staying there to honor the memory of people, like that you would have in a ritual, but at the same time you somehow anthropomorphize them with the story that you tell them, and they become those bodies that are wrapped up, and that's tough. That's hard to. You think that it could look like a decorative piece. It's not. It's really telling something that is very interesting on how these flowers become almost like not a witness. You know, it's not Kapwani Kiwanga's like flowers as witness of history, but at least as a reminder, and almost as a, I don't want to say a placeholder of those bodies, but
the
an
flowers,
embodiment of them, actually.
The flowers are also a tool for you.
Yeah, that's my main medium, because I use flower for all of the like long artistic practice. From the previous slide, we see some young women from Hanoi. that I invited them to interact have like a performative part of the installation, because for me it's something also femininity. It's like very feminine, and I also borrowed Emily Dickinson poem. There is a sentence that I really like. It's about tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Yeah, so for me that's like a logic of metaphor, because all of the figurative elements like flower, death, burial, and even like color. Yeah, so all of this like making a connection, and for me as a performer, a caretaker, and also a grave digger. So I perform it, and it's kind of like a metaphorical, something as a metaphorical role of someone who buries something, who try to hide something, and as you can see here, chrysanthemum. And I think here in France, people also use chrysanthemum a lot for dead people going to cemeteries. Yeah. So so I have this one. Yeah, but actually this was also associated with another piece I have when I did in the U.S. But also again because of censorship, Mizuki Endo, a Japanese curator who worked with me from this one, and he said like Quỳnh, you cannot just show that piece in Vietnam because the venue will be shut down. So I have to to create like another version, like a Vietnam version and the U.S. version.
There's a question that I want to ask you in that exact right moment, but like coming to performance as this way of expressing something while too short to get caught by the authorities. Like, where did you realize that? Did you realize that before you went to art school in the US, or was it while you discovered performance, like doing your studies in the US that you said, hey, this could actually be very operational and useful in
No, actually, I mean, like in Vietnam, everyone know about that, but they just don't want to talk about that. And the thing, because in the US, my degree is about like studio practice, so it's more emphasis in painting, because I'm also have roots in as a painter and architecture. But performance is a part of my like practice that I feel like the art world needs more performance, like happening.
No,
Yeah.
my question is like, did you start performance before going to the US?
Yeah,
or is it while you were in the US that you realized that could
No,
be
I did that more than a decade ago. Like my first solo performance in 2010. So now it's like 13 years. Yeah.
And since we have like a few minutes left, do you want to say a few words about this film and performance that you have done? With blinded eyes.
Yeah, this piece I did during my time in Europe. In terms of talking about individual history and also like collective history. I don't know this, but most of my works care about historical memory and the war time. So last year when I was in Germany and also in Austria, something to do with the thing happened in Ukraine. So this I always when people just like looking at something and then I talk, it's a little bit distracting. But this performance, I think about like. Chess is not words and words is no game, but how about we play chess in a blank phone? Like I'm thinking like a dictator may win here and there during his time, but what if he cannot see anything? Is it something? Because I'm also a chess player, and but even when I try to something like to situate the thing, it's something. Something happened in my mind. I think about that, but in the reality, if I live this thing, it's totally different. So this piece, something I said like a chess game on European grounds when the gunfire not so far away. That at the same time, and this is an excerpt of the piece I did last year. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you so much, Quỳnh Lam. And so maybe before we wrapped up this conversation. Do you have any question for? Yes, Elena. Do you wanna take a? Yeah.
So to Martin, probably, in regard to the critical zone. So it is this kind of like layer of life, and what the Latour is saying was inspirational for me as curator. So the critical zone is the opposite of the globe, right? So, and he also famously stated that we don't live on the globe, so it's a total obstruction. We live in the critical zone. And then he says that how difficult it is to find images or to create images, because it is a kind of like a view from inside, like an impossible view. So when you were curating the biennial, was it something on your mind? Were you looking for artists like with this ability or like this type of approaches, like the view from inside, like interiority in a sense?
That's a beautiful question, Elena, and I think that it's actually, yeah, it was really throughout, not so much about the biennial, but because the biennial, I mean, that was one section, but the show that we did in Karlsruhe at the Z Camp, that was really like mainly focused about critical zone. One of the main aspects was to say, okay, how do we get away from that view from thousands of kilometers away, that is the view of the globe, that is almost like the view of God, if you think about it, you know, it's not from so far. And so how do you go and land from a view from inside, and also how can you actually like, then it becomes fairly complex, because you know, like that doesn't mean that you want the local view. No, it should be a networked view. It should be like, it should be connected to plenty of different places at the same time. And so there are works that do that quite successfully, I believe. I'm going to take very different examples, but to come back to Zhang Yongda, you know, like he does something very interesting about visualizing those particles that actually come from so far, but also come from the Earth's crust all together, and creates a symphony with it. A symphony, that's a lot to say, but create a sound piece with it. Ayel Weisman for Forensic Architecture, with this piece that we had commissioned that created them so much trouble, that was cloud studies. Like they really look at, okay, through the politics of the air, they have this way of looking at like different localities, how air is going to become politicized in different contexts and become like a topic of various conflicts. And so that is a very concrete view from this issue that refuses to take this overarching, you know, this zoomed out position. Like really the enemy, I think, was really like this idea that like you could zoom in and out. No, you can connect various places together, see how they're networked together, and how they articulate a problem together. But that's, so really that's one of the, and that's why we insisted so much on artists that were working it somehow with this, I don't want to say rhizomatic projects, but where in their aesthetic there was something that was very networked, because they were never talking about one specific place, but also always like how that place was getting connected to other problems. And yeah, that's really, but that's a beautiful question. Thank you, Elena. It was really the main difficulty while we were building that show, the main stake, the main challenge.
Thank you. Do we have another question?
I had a question for Charwei.
Yeah.
But I can also ask you, we're running a little late, but I can ask you after. But I had a question behind the process. How do you select your locations for your projects, the communities? How do you decide where you want to go for your next project?
I guess my it seems random on the screen, but I guess it's very much connected to my own life. So like where my life is taking me. So for a long time, my partner, he's from a refugee community, a Tibetan refugee community who's from India. So through him, we were traveling in Nepal, and then that's and also actually we feel very connected to the community in Nepal. So that was, that. And so kind of each one has its different, it kind of happened organically. And of course, in Taiwan, I work, very closely. And also there's different levels of closeness with each community.
And actually, I have a last question for you. So, for instance, for the performance that is happening here at Asia Now, and for the one that we have seen, what are the traces that you want to keep of the performances? What are the archives that you want to keep? Or do you want to destroy everything and just to have like the moment, like you said it? No, but like for performative artists, it is very important to know how to keep a trace. And like so many artists like Tino Segal doesn't want it to be recorded, nor collected, no photographs and so on. So it really is like for every artist, I'm sure there is a different reply. So do you want to keep something like the smell? You were a lot talking about the smell of the flowers, like how we change it through time, like a body in a way, like you were saying.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So usually I do like a video performance. So one of my other kind of like major works is something called like I Am Not a Spice. But I think this one now maybe you can find from it's like an acquisition from the Charwei collection, so maybe you can find that on the institution. But yeah, just so usually I have like documentation of my performance because I also take a good care of my tea very well. I have photo, I have footage, and yeah, sometimes I sketch about that, but all of these things are related in one team. And for the piece over there, I guess there is a layer on the if you spot that carefully, you will see like a very thin layer of fabric. So during the performance, I did write a lot like poetry and things, but it's like layering, just write something but hide it and like have the flower overlap and then the soil. So and also the rains. When the rains come, I think it's just like blurry and it's fade away. So I'm curious to see in the next few days for the install and something will be reviewed on Earth for that. So I guess maybe the piece of fabric, like the remaining of the performance, it's for me like drawing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question. Yes.
It was more about the critical zone to stick on the project of the whole. Thank you very much for it. And I was wondering, when you made the Guinard in Taipei, how could you say that? Did you see in the project of the idea of this critical zone, like how the impact was to? Because when Latour was from Occident, and when you bring him to Orient, to the West and the East, we are here in Asia Now today, so it would be interesting to know how it can evolve, and if there was an evolution, if it has the impact on the object of this vision. Yeah.
So you're asking a West versus East perspective? Is that the question?
More or less, or if it opens doors, and if this project can travel, I don't know, in other places of the world, if you have different types of philosophy, if you can make it a more, how could I say, more complete, complete is not the good word.
Yeah, because the critical zone is literally like all of the surface of the Earth, plus what's beneath it, plus what's above it. So it's a fairly complete.
How you feel, how you stand for this conception. Your relation with the world is very different.
No, but that's a very interesting question. But I can take another example than the one of the critical zone, because the critical zone, first of all, it's not even a concept. Like it's a word that already existed to describe how different scientists that didn't know how that knew well how certain processes were functioning in terms of water, plenty of geochemical process, but like water rate, CO2 rates, etc. But they don't understand still quite how they interact together. And that there's nothing specifically Western about that, in the sense that like there are major observatories that are in China that are doing amazing work. There's major ones that are in Taiwan that are doing work. There are some in India. There are some. So you have some in America. You have. Then it's true that there is more in countries where there's a lot of funding for those kind of scientific research. So
it doesn't have real impact. That was my question actually. If it has an impact to bring this project in different parts, with different disciplines, whatever happening, if it has.
I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, it's not really a good question.
No. But like your question, for example, would totally make sense if we're talking about landscape. Landscape, there is something very, it's like it's a way of apprehending Earth. Your surrounding within the Western tradition. The landscape is literally like paysage. It's like you take a place and you frame it and you take a piece of that. And it's quite known that, like in for example, in the Chinese tradition, like it's already a relationship. It's like water and mountain. It's wind and sun. So that's already thinking the relationship. And so then the question that hurts is like, was China able to deal in a better way with extractivism? Not necessarily, but at least there is already this kind of like ingrained notion of a relationship between various elements. It's a bit less far off than the landscape that is literally, like a frame depicting a static place that really is the root of the emergence of that style pictorially in the 18th century mainly. That's really when it becomes a topic of its own. So I don't know if that kind of answers. No, je crois pas.
I'm saying that I think of them as a moving object. So maybe that's why. Thank you very much.
Gaël, you. Oh yeah, absolutely. This can continue around a matcha latte, thanks to Alexandra and Cathy. So if we don't have another question, we are a bit late. So we have to. No. It's not because of you. It's because of me. I'm the one to blame. I'm the timekeeper, and I was not the right person to do that. And my team knows that very well. So they're being like, whoa, for 5 minutes. So it's not your fault at all. And no, come on. And so, but thank you so much for joining today. Again, go to Taipei tomorrow to see and very ecological footprint, which is perfect. To see Martin Shaw, go online to have all the information. It's closing tomorrow. Can you imagine? Even with the flight, you can arrive and it will be closed. So this is a very, very bad advice that I'm giving to the audience, and again, I don't want to be like responsible for carbon footprint, so not at all. Just go online, and since Martin is here, he can talk about the exhibition even more around around a cafe. And thank you so much to the artists that came with us today, and you can walk the fair also to discover more of their works, and so the performance around here is done. Now it's gonna be living its own life with between the three layers that Martin described it. Okay, thank you so much.